You're listening to the Chiropractic Connection, by chiropractors, for chiropractors. This month's episode is a doozy, but the listen is 100% worth it. This month, we'd like to recognize Arthritis Awareness Month. Currently, there are approximately 40 million U.S. citizens affected by arthritis, and a quarter of that population includes children. Fortunately, chiropractic is a great drug-free solution for these people. In this month's episode, Dr. Kelly Baxter will be sharing nutritional tips for those affected by arthritis. And newly featured Dr. Paul Goldberg will share his story of how arthritis has affected him and how chiropractic has supported his lifestyle. And for our guest interview, Dr. Jackson will be learning some of the newest, most groundbreaking scientific and technological research studies that support the idea that chiropractic actually influences everything in the body from the one, the only, Dr. Heidi Haavik. So, here is this month's episode. Who doesn't like a moment to shine in the spotlight? GCA is always ready to give our members a shout out.
One of our newest members, Dr. Kelly Kawamoto, is an expert in brain-gut lifestyle. Kawamoto has taken part in many training courses and is a certified massage therapist, EMT, and personal fitness trainer. Kawamoto is also a doctor of medicine and chiropractic. She recently participated in a training to learn about allergy elimination technique and muscle response test. Currently, Dr. Kawamoto is working towards building trustworthy relationships with hospitals to integrate chiropractors into their offices by stressing the importance of adjustments and their connection to brain-gut health. She hopes the integration of such programs will better assist patients through the state of Georgia. Thank you, Dr. Kelly Kawamoto, for all you do to support the chiropractic community.
And now for the moment everyone has been waiting for, starring this month's experts.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Chiropractic Connection. I am your host, Dr. Amber Jackson, and today with me, I have the amazing, brilliant mind. You guys are not even going to believe who's here. It's Dr. Heidi Haavik. Can you believe it? She's here. I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Absolute pleasure, Amber. Took a bit of time to organize this one, didn't it? But we're here.
Yes, that's all right. I know you're a busy woman. You have a lot of things that you're doing. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us today. Before we get started, I know a lot of people know you, especially being that you're a huge researcher. But for those people who don't know you, could you introduce yourself and just tell people a little bit about you and who you are?
Right, so snapshot Heidi Haavik. I was born in New Zealand, but I actually grew up in Norway. So for those who speak Norwegian, I speak fluent Norwegian. Came back out to New Zealand for a 6-month visit, and that's now almost 30 years ago. So never quite made it back to Norway. I have 2 babies. My son's now 24 and my daughter Sophie is 20. I studied at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to be when I was growing up. I only came out for that 6-month visit to New Zealand and then I was going to go home. I had studied a bit of philosophy. I was interested in psychology. I was interested in medicine. My dad's a doctor. My little brother's a doctor. I've got my uncles and aunts are physiotherapists. So I have quite a medical community where I grew up. But interestingly, my mother's grandfather was one of the first 1,000 chiropractors ever to graduate from Palmer College. So I always knew that we had a slightly different philosophy in our household. Obviously, that's just come down through Gran and through my mother. So even though she's married to a doctor, we would she'd make all food from scratch. We'd have a lot of supplements. I was into exercise. So it's just really interesting the parallels there. My Norwegian family, my dad's side, also started one of Norway's oldest rehab centers, which also started out as a real health spa. So I knew my destiny was within health. But as I was out in New Zealand, I found out about the chiropractic college, and because it was just starting up, so just been one cohort had started their first year, and I went into that second cohort. So I studied physiology, I went through chiropractic college, loved it. And I was still curious and I just didn't quite stop. So I went on and studied human neurophysiology at Auckland University and then ended up doing a PhD with Bernadette Murphy. Long story short, she up and left the country. So my only ambition with the research was to be Bernadette Murphy's research assistant, and I'd volunteer one day a week just to work with her because she's such a brilliant mind. But she left the country. So the only way I could continue doing research was actually to take that job as the research director at the New Zealand College, because you kind of have to do research attached to a tertiary institution. So I'd either have to give up the research that I just started, and even back then, Amber, we were seeing that we were changing the brain. So I knew I'd hit on something that was big. So I was like, no, okay, I'm going to continue this. So I took the role, and, Jesus, that's now 4 years ago. And I'm now, Vice President of Research at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. Our research centre, which we established, like me and one part-timer, the part-timer that was helping me and establish that, he's now the president of the college. And and the research centre is now 21 people. So it's grown really big.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Did you ever think when you started on this path that you would be where you're at today? Or you're like, I'm just interested in it, and now here you are?
I was passionate about how we could, with our hands, gently adjusting people, how that could change them so dramatically. And I didn't care in what way we changed them. I wasn't hung up in any particular story or theory. I just, it wasn't gelling with my scientific brain. I had these questions, like, how can someone, because almost sometimes you adjust them and their personality changes. How's that possible if all we're doing is relieving pressure off squashed nerve roots? Then there was this research showing that, well, actually, it takes quite a lot of pressure on nerve roots to actually interfere with the axoplasmic flow or the action potentials across a nerve root. And normally you'd have so much pressure on those nerve roots to interfere with communication across a nerve root that you'd end up with radiating pain. So even that theory didn't make sense. So when we started, even in my early PhD studies, to see that when we were adjusting people, we were changing their brain function, like lasting brain changes, we started to rethink the whole model, and this is when it got exciting. And then I've just followed the data. I've never stopped.
Right. Absolutely. Because there's so much. There's so many, I think, unexplored areas in our adjustments and what we do, and we need someone to do it. So thank you first and foremost for doing it, because we know it makes changes, but again, to have that research to back it up is incredible. It's huge.
It's awesome that we've got theories, and like these philosophers from our past, they were unbelievable, and they were so ahead of their time. It's not even funny. And it's perfectly okay if they got some tiny little detail wrong,
Right.
It doesn't make them idiots. If anything, they got 9 things correct and then one tiny little thing wrong. What about the 9 things they got right? So they were geniuses.
Absolutely.
Didi and BJ, and absolute geniuses of their time.
So speaking of Didi, what do you think about, with the first adjustment with Harvey Lillard and him restoring his hearing, has your research led you to any conclusive answers or thought processes on how that could have happened? I'm interested to know your, what do you think?
Because we now know that when we adjust subluxations, we enable the brain to more accurately perceive what's going on inside of your body and in the world around you. So we've even done studies showing that the way your brain interprets sound and visual information changes when we adjust you. So because it's this central integration, you don't just see what your eyes tell you and hear what your ears tell you, your brain interprets that.
Right.
So
and we fill in the gaps.
Interpretation we can alter when we adjust the spine. So I think with Harvey Lillard, obviously some accident had happened in his life and he'd lost his hearing, right? And so the brain wasn't interpreting the sound information anymore. And then Didi comes along and adjusts him, and the brain goes, ooh, that's what these signals mean, and he can hear again. We've even done other studies where we've looked at cranial nerve innervated structures like jaw clenching. We can significantly improve that. Jaw clenching is a cranial nerve function, and that improves significantly and lasts for up to a week. So we know we can change the way the brain interprets cranial nerve information, but not just spinal function. That's obvious, right? We're pushing on the spine and we're changing the way the brain perceives what's going on at the spinal level, but this seems to be really vitally important for how the brain interprets sound, visual information, probably smell. smell, probably taste. And now, some of these little case studies that come along, that they smell differently, they taste things differently, sort of makes more sense. And I think there's a lot more internal signals as well. We know we changed dramatically the proprioceptive system, how the brain perceives where it is in space. But again, not just the spine, but arms, legs. So the cool thing is, we'll translate this into a normal human being. Well, this probably affects their ability, clumsiness. A person should actually know where they are, and they shouldn't really injure themselves unless a kid comes catapulting onto them. You are just out for a normal walk or a run. Like, you shouldn't pull a muscle, because your brain knows the length of all of your muscles. So if you're just out for a normal walk or run, you shouldn't pull a muscle. You shouldn't stub your toe. You shouldn't knock your elbow on door frames. You shouldn't hit your head when getting into a car. But a lot of people do. And that tells me their proprioceptive system is out of place, or their brain isn't accurately aware of where their body is. Right. So this is this fascinating interplay. We can actually explain it now according to the contemporary scientific model of what a subluxation is and the effects of the adjustment. It actually makes perfect sense that Harvey Lillard regained his hearing. Pretty cool, though.
Yeah, it is very cool. Absolutely. I love to hear that.
Now, for a brief intermission.
Healthy mind, healthy body, healthy soul. Here is today's nutritional experts giving you the latest tips and tricks to keep you healthy.
Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Kelly Baxter, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me today on the Georgia Chiropractic Association podcast. This month's topic is rheumatoid arthritis. I think it's important as chiropractors that we're armed with some healthy tips to address rheumatoid arthritis patients from a natural standpoint when they come into our clinics. This is a condition that can't be cured, but rheumatoid arthritis patients can greatly benefit from holistic treatments. As you all know, RA is an inflammatory condition where the body's immune system doesn't recognize itself and begins attacking its own tissues, including the joints, and in the latter stages, organs. As chiropractors, one of the best things you can do is brush up on your radiology and recognize these patients when they come in. You need to realize that you might be the first doctor that sees this patient. Know what lab tests to follow up with, and get your RA patients moving daily with stretches, walking, Tai Chi, yoga. These type of activities are going to be great for them. Sometimes when they have a flare, they may need to rest, but you don't want them to rest for too long or they're going to stiff up even more. From a nutritional standpoint, you want to get them on anti-inflammatory foods. Keep them off sugar and highly processed foods and things that have a lot of chemicals and preservatives. If they can't pronounce it, they probably shouldn't be eating it. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fish are going to help reduce inflammation. They're going to help reduce cytokines, which cause inflammation. So you want to get them on the fatty fishes, tunas, things like that. If they don't like those, borage oil, primrose oil, those are more plant-based omega-3 fatty acids that they can try. And then your nuts and seeds are going to contain those too. Increase whole grains because they help reduce C-reactive proteins. And eat the rainbow, of course. You want them to have lots of fruits, veggies, because of the antioxidants they possess. Those are going to help fight free radicals in their system. And then have them supplement with vitamin D. As the disease seems to progress, vitamin D levels seem to start decreasing in your RA patients, so you want them to supplement. Most RA patients are going to lose some vitamin D, and a lot of them are deficient in vitamin D when they first come in. B12 is another thing to get them on. It's going to help them with energy, and zinc is also going to help support their immune systems, and this is an autoimmune disease, and it's going to help maintain their cartilage. Have your RA patients also add things like turmeric, ginger, boswellia or Indian frankincense to their diets to help with pain and inflammation too. If we take this type of approach, hopefully we can slow the progression of the disease by keeping the inflammation low, fighting the cytokines, decreasing their C-reactive proteins, and keeping their antioxidant levels up, which is going to help boost their immune system. So I hope you enjoyed today's tips on rheumatoid arthritis, and I hope this helps you the next time you have a rheumatoid arthritis patient come through the door.
Now back to our featured interview.
So I know that you have written a book, The Reality Check, and there's so much information in there. Do you plan on doing another book? Because this is, I feel like with all the knowledge that you have, packing it into, I think it's what, like 68 or 70 some pages, like you have so much more to give. So
I am. My second book is called Secrets of the Spine. Ooh. So the reason for this is the first book was actually, I know I said it was for the public, but it wasn't really. It was really for the chiropractic profession, because I figured before I go out to the public with what this science is telling us, the profession kind of needed to be warned, if you know what I mean. Yeah, because it's important that they know before, imagine all patients coming in and you still think you're relieving pressure off squash nerve roots, and patients start coming in with, I want to fine tune my brain, please.
Right. And they're like,
what?
Yeah. Right.
And then, of course, the public book that I'm actually working on right now called Secrets of the Spine, it's not about chiropractic. It's about why their spine is important for their brain and their health. So that's why my accountants have actually suggested that I add stress and sleep to the title. So I said, okay, stress, sex, and sleep, Secrets of the Spine.
I like that. It's a little mystery, little, dang a little carrot. People are like, oh, what's this about?
The main kind of new focus of it is literally this connection. Because again, like I've just followed the data for about 25 years. And one of those studies, we ended up in this hospital setting in Denmark. So we're literally in a hospital in this lab of Professor Asbjørn Drews. He's a very, world-renowned pain professor. And his bioengineer, this brilliant, smart lady called Dina Lelek, is doing all the data collection, all the analysis. And she was doing whole head EEG analysis and then calculating where in the brain the changes were taking place. And so when she did that, and all I was doing was, I designed the study, but I was there helping to check and adjust the subjects for the study. And so she tells me at the end of it that, Heidi, when you do what you do, and the part of the brain that you're changing the most is a significant change in this one part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And honestly, Amber, I could have kissed the woman. I refrained myself because I don't think she really wanted me to, but it was like, it's unbelievable, because when you start to learn about the prefrontal cortex and what it's involved with, again, you see, this is when it starts to explain so much more. For one, that prefrontal cortex just behind our forehead, it's a part of the brain that integrates all that sensory information from both your internal sensory organs and your external sensory organs. So it's part of how you experience your reality. Like that's what this brain part is really important in. But it's also one of the key controllers of your mental health and your emotional ability to not be a tantruming 2-year-old is the prefrontal cortex. So all of your mental health is basically under prefrontal cortex inhibition. It sort of protects you from getting really angry or being really upset. It's this nice inhibition so that we can function rationally. It actually is the seat of our intelligence. So it's the seat of our rational thought, our ability to start tasks, stop tasks, to pay attention to what matters, to inhibit what's not important. It's very involved in every movement we make all day, every day. It's vitally important in activating our parasympathetic nervous system. And of course, our parasympathetic nervous system is the relaxation, digestion, healing side. It activates that. It inhibits the stress systems. It inhibits the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight response. It inhibits your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is again your neuroendocrine stress response. And because of that communication with the autonomic nervous system and the neuroendocrine system, the prefrontal cortex that we affect with every adjustment we make is vitally important for immune function. You're suddenly like looking at this going, oh my goodness. It's not necessarily, doesn't mean that we cure everything, but it means now we have a biologically plausible mechanism for why people could get better with a whole range of different things, which is what we see in practice. Not that we can necessarily predict it, right? But, people's all sorts of symptoms can improve. And we now understand why. And that's what's so exciting to me.
That is extremely exciting. I know that in the book that you talked about how many times people get adjusted. Obviously, there's people who are not getting adjusted enough. And I think at one point you had said that you thought some docs were over adjusting their patients. Have you found yet in the data any research that suggests kind of a sweet spot or a number of times, or is it really varied depending on each individual?
When I started out in research, I thought we probably over adjusted people. My personal thoughts at the time. When I look at the research now, what I actually think we are doing as chiropractors, I think we're actually exercising the spine back into proper function, because there's quite a lot of interesting literature now that shows that when you've injured the spine, the little muscles closest to the spine and skull, we know that they become atrophied, they become fibrotic, they get a lot of fatty infiltration, they change their fiber type. And even the muscle spindles themselves are changed or altered over time after you've, say, injured the spine. So if you think about an atrophied muscle, a shrunken, stiff muscle, it's going to take a bit of time to work that muscle back into proper function again, right?
Right.
Which is interesting, yeah, because it's almost now, if our role really is to exercise, and when I mean exercise, when we go in and adjust a subluxated segment, we're going in right on a specific segment. You're actually moving or stretching those little muscles closest to the spine and skull. So you're kind of actually activating those muscles a bit like an exercise session. That's how I'm now viewing it. So if you're exercising the spine back into function, well, isn't it interesting that the few studies that have looked at optimal adjustment sessions tend to correlate quite well with our, going to the gym recommendations, right? You don't just go to the gym twice and you're meant to be fit for life, right? I wish.
Right, don't we all?
Yeah, it's usually like at least 3 times a week. And then, you've got to do that for, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then you can maybe drop it down to twice a week once you've got your fitness levels up. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's interesting how that kind of correlates now because if our role is to exercise those little muscles each time we're adjusting them, when you look at clinical recommendations from chiropractors in the field, it tends to quite often be 2 or 3 times a week for the first 4 to 6 weeks. And then we'll see how you're going. And if you're managing to hold everything, then we can drop it down a little bit. And then you get down into maintenance care. And then there are a couple of studies, which I think are kind of interesting. Mitch Haas, he's an American chiropractor who's gone into research. Lovely, lovely guy, because he really likes his red wine. So I particularly like him too. No, I'm just joking, but he does quite like his red wine. But anyway, he did these studies where he looked at how often do we need to, say, see somebody over a 6-week period, but then he followed them up for a year. So it's fascinating. So he first started doing this in low back pain. So he had people with low back pain, and then he'd be adjusting them once a week, twice a week, or no times in a week, and then following up, see how well that went. Around 2 to 3 times, there wasn't huge benefit, but the 2 or 3 times a week was much better than once a week, which was much better than no times a week. And the benefits lasted, which is interesting. And then he did it in cervicogenic headaches. So headaches that are coming from neck dysfunction. And they were fascinating because there was a linear response. And the changes last up to a year. So, and that's a 6-week period. Of course, we don't know, well, what about if it was 4 or 5 times a week? Well, we don't know. He didn't test that.
Right.
And what about longer than 6 weeks of care? Well, we don't know because he didn't test that. And then there was another study done in Sweden by Eklund, and they looked at maintenance care versus symptomatic care. So just coming back when it hurt or getting a regular adjustment session. And their regular care was like once every 2 months. I mean, that's not a lot, right? When you think about it.
No, not at all.
Not at all. And this was also over a year. And it was really interesting. Their patients got seen about roughly the same amount of time. But the people that got that maintenance care adjustment set up, they had less pain days over that year than the people that waited until it dysfunctioned again. So what all of this is telling me, because now I'm summarizing this, is that we probably exercising spines back into better function. Most chiropractors are probably not seeing their patients enough. And I would imagine that a regular care setting would be better for most people than just waiting until the dysfunction builds back up again and then coming back in when they're in agony again.
Right. Absolutely. I would agree with you on that. I think that's one of the hardest things we see in the field are those patients who get well under a length of time and then disappear and then come back a year or 2 years later, like, I did great for this length of time. You go, okay, that's awesome. And then they're back. And it's like, dang, if I would have caught you 2 months before this came back, or we would have stayed on top of it. No, you're not back at a 10, but you're still at an 8. So now we've kind of got to start over again.
Now, for a brief intermission.
Have you ever wondered what makes chiropractic? We don't always have the answers, but it never hurts to imagine.
Hey everybody, Dr. Eric Plasker here with Philosophy in Action, and I'm going to tell you 3 patient stories, very, very relevant. Chiropractic philosophy, science, and art, by the way, all in action. And what's really interesting, one of these people is an American, one of these is from the country of India, one of these is from Brazil. They all came in within the last 7 days, and we see this all the time. So arthritis, we know that osteoarthritis is degenerative. We know that rheumatoid arthritis, we know that it's inflammatory, it's hormone related. And what's very interesting, and all 3 of these people had varying degrees of both types of arthritis. And what is very interesting, the first guy from America, osteoarthritis, severe degeneration, severe nerve pain, felt immediate relief from his crisis care, responded very quickly. His immediate acute pain got better. But what's really amazing, we educated him 100-year lifestyle way. We talked to him about crisis care, making the critical transition to lifestyle care. He bought into the big idea. He realized that if it could degenerate, that his body could regenerate. And literally, he's like 2.5 years into his care. He almost never misses, except for when he travels and goes out of town. And he has no more leg pain. He's back in his life. He's traveling, standing up straight. If he has a rough patch, it goes away in split seconds. And he's absolutely loving the care because he knows that we are not treating his symptoms, that we are removing the interference so that his body can heal itself. And over time, over the last 2.5 years, it consistently gets better, and it's still improving, which is such an exciting thing. So don't just treat the immediate acute symptoms. Give people a long-term vision and keep them plugged in along the way. They will want it for themselves, and as time goes on, they will continue to heal and improve. Second person, this woman came in, she's from India. She had severe pain going down her arm. She's arthritic in her C6, C7 area. There's degeneration. She has tried everything. She's been to physical therapists. She's been to other chiropractors who did not adjust her, by the way. They just did other types of treatments to hopefully just make her feel better. She did not respond. Well, guess what? She says, Dr. Plasker, you know what? I've had this for 15 years. It's been killing me. I can't work. I can't do anything. Well, she said, how long is it going to take? I said, well, less than 15 years. And she looked at me like, that's a ridiculous answer, Dr. Plasker. But I said, listen, I have no idea. We're not going to treat your symptoms. We're going to look to work with your spine, correct the subluxation, adjust your spine and nervous system, and let's give it a shot. Well, 2 weeks into her care, she's feeling so much better. She's got very, very minimal to no pain going down her arm. She's got flexibility in her neck again. She's got range of motion. The inflammation has gone down, and she's super duper excited. And I joked with her the other day. I said, remember I told you it would take less than 15 years? Well, it's less than 15 weeks, and it's less than 15 days. Now it's important that you think long term. Don't just treat the symptoms. Let's stay at work. Keep your spine clear long enough so your body can change. And you know what? She's committed to it. She's excited. It's the most for her, the most valuable investment she feels like she could make. And she's doing it because she wants it, and she's seeing the results. Third, this guy came in. He's from Brazil. Severe pain down his leg. He came in limping. He's got a history of osteoarthritis. He's got some rheumatoid arthritis. He's got an inflammatory condition. His foot is swollen. It almost looks like he's got circulation problems. He actually went to the medical doctor. He comes in and he did not get any results in a lot of different places. Went to a chiropractor about 4 years ago. He did not get adjusted. And he came in. We did 2 adjustments the first day, 1 adjustment the next morning. He was 60 to 80% better, and he's super fired up. He said, I cannot even believe I've been suffering like this my whole life. So what's my point? My point is, like all of you know, and I hope that you know, and we need to take care of our people in this way, to not just treat the symptoms. That if there is interference to the nervous system, subluxation, the body cannot do what it's supposed to do. The body adapts in ways that can be destructive, even though the body's adapting in a way that's keeping that person alive. We need to work with these people to teach them about the importance of having a healthy spine and nervous system over the course of their entire lifetime. And whatever else you may be doing in your practice, the number one thing, in my opinion, from a philosophy and action perspective, is locating and correcting those subluxations, getting them out of their life, these people's lives. So thanks for being with us, Philosophy in Action. Come on. Our community, our state, people are in desperate need of new healthcare leadership. They need you, chiropractors, so step it up. Thanks for being with GCA.
Now back to our featured interview.
I think if we can explain to patients the physiology of what's happening in their spine, like if they realize that, because recently, a couple of years ago in the pandemic, we wrote this big invited review article where we've kind of discussed the contemporary model. And what was really fascinating for me to come out of that was that we found 3 reasons why the spine would dysfunction. And when I'm saying dysfunction, I mean subluxation. And it's interesting because it's not just physical trauma that can lead to this dysfunction. So the little muscles get turned off and atrophy and shrink and blah, blah, blah. And therefore you don't control the movement pattern appropriately and you have a subluxated segment, right? We also found evidence that psychological stress, psychological trauma can do the same thing, can turn these little muscles off. And these little muscles are the eyes for your spine, like they're the eyes in the spine for your brain. It's how your brain knows what's going on in the spine, are these little deep muscles close to the spine and skull. They're the ones that atrophy almost immediately if you physically injured the spine as well. And we know that they then have all these changes. They become fibrotic, they shrink, fatty infiltration. So they become really dysfunctional like months after a physical injury. But we also know psychological trauma can turn these muscles off.
Right.
And one more thing, we know local inflammation does. So, here we've got trauma, toxins, and thoughts. I mean,
right.
Wonder who would have thought of that?
I don't know. I'm wondering where I've heard that before. Huh.
I know.
It's such a coincidence.
I have never set out to prove DD right. I've just wanted to understand how does that spine function. Another fascinating thing just on this topic before I forget is like other medical researchers are recognizing the importance of the signaling of the afferent signaling of these deep paraspinal muscles. So basically the way the little muscles closest to the spine, the way they are moved and stretched, then they send messages to the brain so the brain knows what's going on. And then it tells the bigger muscles how to move the spine when you need to move the spine. And so those little muscles are so important. Now it's recognized that the signaling or the change in signaling from those little muscles is most likely what's causing and maintaining a lot of musculoskeletal pain symptoms. Now, isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
What that means to me as a chiropractor is subluxated segments is most likely what's causing and maintaining a lot of chronic musculoskeletal problems. We were exercising the spine back into proper function, you wouldn't get the build-up and the chronic musculoskeletal, which is exactly what you said, your example of the patient that, give them a year and a half and they're back again because it's rebuilt back up. But you can probably avoid that.
Yeah, that maladaptive neuroplastic change you kind of refer to, right?
Yes.
So we basically have taught the brain how to be dysfunctional because of other things that aren't functioning properly. We're not fixing them. So now the brain goes, this is how I work. I'm supposed to work like this.
Little straws on the camel's back build up when you are under pressure and stress. So it's like adaptations. And I think that subluxations then coming about are a bit like, again, circuit breakers blowing, right? Well, we can't cope with all this pressure and stress in our current life. So we'll turn that one off and we'll not deal with that and we'll put that aside. And it's not just spinal dysfunction that happens over time. We know that, for example, you start developing insulin resistance, you start developing metabolic disorders. Your prefrontal cortex is one of the key parts of the brain that succumbs to stress. And the prefrontal cortex, when that goes offline more often than not, you start to have memory problems. You can't quite remember everything. Your words don't come out quite right. You're not being able to pay so much attention. You start to get more emotional because it's, again, the emotional control is gone. Right. So then all of a sudden you're getting more angry, upset, you've got a short temper, you're getting grumpy with your kids and your partner. And all of these changes are all taking place when the body's under too much pressure. And you can then be developing these musculoskeletal problems and pains, but you also get a rise in inflammation. And we know that the biggest killers of today are all associated with high inflammatory levels. That's your cancers, your strokes, your diabetes, your Alzheimer's, the neurodevelopmental disorders. They're all mental health disorders are linked with high inflammatory levels as well. It's like the stress and pressure doesn't just cause subluxations, but it also causes all these health conditions as well. And the key thing I think we need to get across to patients is you can move the other direction. You can move back towards health. And we know there's quite a lot of things that people can do to move back towards health, which, for example, exercise, mindfulness meditation, looking after your gut, getting your microbiome working, good sleep. There's quite a few things you can do. We know you can do. But I think one of the cornerstones is getting checked and adjusted.
Absolutely.
And why? Because when we are checking and adjusting people, if we're enabling their brain to more accurately perceive what's going on and better control and adapt to their current situation, well, then they should, in theory, be able to digest better, to move better. It's like everything should be able to function better if you're under chiropractic care again.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was reading, or was I reading it, or I heard this study where I think it said that the brain has neuroplastic changes for up to 6 days after an adjustment. Have you found that? Is that accurate?
I haven't seen that, because the studies that we've recorded, normally we record for, say, maybe an hour and a half after a study, if we've set it up to do so. But we've also, in some studies, for example, the jaw clenching study I talked about earlier, we measured them again a week later, and they were still so much stronger in their jaw clenching muscles. So that lasted for a week. We know that for sure. But then there are other studies like Kelly Holt's PhD research in older adults. He was following them up for 12 weeks. So, and what we found there was within the first 4 weeks, there were a lot of changes, but at 12 weeks, so between 4 and 12 weeks, there were all these other changes that took place. So these guys were getting checked twice a week. So I think what you'll find is that it's again like little straws that build up on a camel's back. Each time again you are switching things on when we're adjusting them. Like this is where, you'll suddenly have patients say, oh, ever since I got under chiropractic care, Heidi, I've managed to come off my high blood pressure medication. Like I was almost fainting and I went to my doctor and my blood pressure's normalized. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, interesting. Well, you see, we actually, when we adjust people, we impact this part called the prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex actually has a big impact on your autonomic nervous system, and your autonomic nervous system controls your blood pressure. That makes total sense to me now. I wouldn't have told you that we're going to cure your blood pressure because I don't know how your spinal dysfunction, your subluxations, is actually affecting you. I don't know what symptoms it's causing up front. But what I do know is your brain controls the whole system. So all sorts of things can get better. Even the way you exercise is going to be different because your brain is going to be controlling your arms and legs in a different way. And your arms and legs attached to the spine. So if the brain's more aware of what's going on in the spine, it can immediately change what's going on in your arms and legs.
So what are you working on now? Because I know that are you interpreting? I think you said that you're not doing research, right?
I started up a company because what I realized is that for most normal chiropractors, me speaking neuroscience, geeky language wasn't quite computing. It wasn't making sense. And this is such vital information, in my opinion, that not only every chiropractor needs to know it, but every patient needs to know it too.
Right.
So I started up a company that translates the science. And that's what the Haavik Research Company is. So I have a whole platform now one's called Chiro's Academy and one's called Chiro's Hub. So the Chiro's Academy is classes for chiropractors to understand the science better. So I translate the science from neuroscience speak to chiropractic language. And in Chiro's Hub, I translate it again to patient language. Because they don't give a shit about chiropractic, funnily enough, but they sure as hell care about their own health. They care about their own health. And if they understood those secrets of the spine, well, they would not be waiting 18 months for all that shit to build back up again,
Absolutely. They would be getting their spine checked more often, and they'd be looking at us as preventative care, which is what we are, but we somehow don't get that role. We are reactive, right? So we get on the back end is when we get care.
And I'd even say that we're not just preventative, but we can also be well-being, like salutogenic, which is not just preventing problems from developing, but actually moving them towards better health. That salutogenic effect as well. You can actually improve your health. Like pre-diabetes or diabetes type 2 is actually something that you can reverse. Like most people don't know that. They go along and they're told that, this is just a one-way route to losing sensation, this, that, and the other thing. But it can actually genuinely be reversed. If you change your lifestyle, it can change. So like understanding that you're not doomed to just get worse and worse and worse as you get older. There's such a thing as healthy aging.
Which is what we need that. We need that conversation more in our model, because honestly, especially in America, I don't know how it is over there, but our healthcare system is very sick care, and it's very unfortunate. So
I think that's universal. But chiropractors, they're in a beautiful place with that knowledge that they have, and to literally be a health coach for their patients. Yeah. So the other cool thing, understanding neuroscience, is if you actually reach small goals, you get this dopamine release in your brain. And this is a very good feeling. This can be addictive. And so if you set small goals, achievable goals with your patient, you work one-on-one with them, you can slowly build on things, but each time they achieve these goals, they should pat themselves on the back, and you have a little dopamine release. It actually makes your brain better capable of achieving more goals and even setting better goals. It's an amazing, once you understand this, you can harness their inner genius to help move them towards better health.
Do you use, or do you recommend, I know you probably can't endorse per se, but any technology or any things, brain tap or any brain tracking systems, myovision, anything sort of like that? What are some of the things that you like to use?
Really interesting, because that's also answering your first question that I never actually managed to get to. But what am I doing now? Because I don't just translate the science, you see, which is for the chiros and the patients. But one thing that we're heading towards, which we're really interested in, is start collecting data from your practices. Because this gets me really excited. I don't know if you've noticed over the pandemic how important big, real data is, like big data. Imagine if we had millions of chiropractic patients from thousands of chiropractors, and you start to get big data, real life data. And this is where technology comes into it. Because, I told you that my team has grown from 1.5 part-timer to 21 people. One of the big things that have changed there is we have a whole tech lab that's joined us. My main right-hand man at the moment, Dr. Imran Khan Niazi, he's a bioengineer. So he's not a chiropractor, he's incredible mind. So we're working on some real cheap technology that's almost wearable technology. So it's technology that patients can actually wear. And from this technology, we're able to then detect whether they're in sympathetic drive, whether their parasympathetic nervous system is activated, so the healing, digesting, relaxing system. We can measure how much they're moving. We can measure their stages of sleep. We can measure their inflammatory levels. We're even working on technology at the moment that can measure insulin and glucose metabolism. And what we're working on is measuring brain health. So what age is your brain, not biologically, not by years, but how old is your brain from stressors? So you can kind of say, I'm 49, but my brain is of a 55-year-old, right? So ideally, that's not good. Ideally, we need to move backwards. So, and a lot of this technology is cheap, like Fitbit type stuff, okay? But it's cool. Made by these super brilliant people with this new tech lab that's come on board. So this is where I'm getting really excited, Amber, because I'm I can't even sit still. You see me, I'm like, okay. In the future, we will be recording data from you and your patients, hopefully really easy, where we can electronically pull data from you, but we will also be directly getting feedback from patients, plus the ones that choose to want to wear some of these wearables, we can actually get this additional data from them as well. And imagine if you knew that you're working on people and before they come into their next visit, you're sitting there going, oh, according to, Heidi and Imran's technology here, this person's gone through a big stressor because their sympathetic nervous system's gone through the roof and the parasympathetic nervous system shut off. Okay, I need to address this. So what's happened? Might need to see you a bit more often at the moment. And you can, again, it sort of gives the power back to the patient too, because they'll be able to see and monitor with objective data that their health is improving or not. Because it's not just adjustments, right? So maybe they do need to increase even more exercise. Maybe they've got some toxins in their environment that they need to get rid of. Maybe they're in a really bad relationship that's just causing so much stress for them that they're not actually able to even heal their current problems. Do you know what I mean? And so wouldn't it be handy to have some of this data? Plus getting even more excited is Imran is one of New Zealand's AI experts. Now, this is when it gets really interesting, because if we're starting to get millions of data inputs from people, from millions of people, from thousands of chiropractors, again, you can actually get the machines themselves can pick out, so you're a 49-year-old woman in this area with these symptoms. Well, the best kind of care for you is this, this, and this. So it's kind of almost kind of spitting out for you to have the best impact on that person's health, other than getting checked and adjusted. Well, and it sort of tailors healthcare to an individual's needs, and it helps support you as the chiropractor, and it helps monitor that they're actually changing according to what you're expecting, and if not, you've got to go look deeper.
Now, for a brief intermission. What better way to make every day your day than by learning how to treat yourself? Here is today's wellness tips.
This is Paul Goldberg speaking on behalf of the Georgia Chiropractic Association, advocating for the doctor of chiropractic as a guardian of public health. Today, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about rheumatoid arthritis and other rheumatoid disorders. This is a topic near and dear to me, as in the 1970s I had rheumatoid arthritis and other rheumatoid diseases, several of them myself. And over the past almost 50 years now, in both through personal experience and primarily through practice experience with thousands of patients, I've gradually learned some lessons that I'd like to share with you today. Rheumatoid diseases afflict a large segment of our population. Rheumatoid arthritis alone affects about 1.5 million people in the United States. About 70% of them are women. Rheumatoid disease patients as a whole I would refer to as the most neglected segment of our population. They receive very little attention. It's a very misunderstood idea. A lot of people think that rheumatoid disorders, rheumatoid arthritis only affects older people. As somebody who was afflicted in his 20s, I can certainly tell you it's not true, not only because of that, but because Dr. Tenner and I at our clinic see many, many patients in their, not only their teenage years and their 20s and 30s with rheumatoid diseases and rheumatoid arthritis, but also many children. These autoimmune disorders occur because there's something going on with the body where the body's attacking itself. But that is not enough to really understand the situation. The approach of medical physicians is to suppress the immune system through toxic pharmaceutical agents, whether that be steroids with all their side effects, or the various biological drugs that you see advertised all over the internet, on the television, on the radio, such as Enbrel, Humira, and Remicade. Many of these will be called TNF blockers. We need to quiet the immune system, but we need to quiet it by identifying what's causing it to be overstimulated in the first place. And to do this, we need a foundational approach. A foundational approach begins with a really good, thorough, lengthy case history on the patient, where we cover their entire life from birth all the way to the present moment. At our clinic, we usually spend about 90 minutes doing that. It has to be a detailed process with the doctor and the patient fully participating. As part of a general foundational approach also, there's some things that should be covered with every patient. One of those, as doctors of chiropractic, is to look thoroughly at the patient's biomechanics and to look thoroughly at the patient's neurological situation, both of those of which we are expert at. Another area we need to take a good look at is their biochemistry, not just their diet, but the way the food is digested, absorbed, and assimilated, and how wastes are eliminated from the body. A third area, which has become increasingly important in recent years, is toxicology. When I was in public health school studying toxicology in the late 70s, it was already an important topic. I think it's even a more important topic now. We are literally immersed in a sea of toxic materials today. Heavy metals, volatile organic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, BPA, glyphosate, a whole host of industrial pollutants in air and water and soil, xenobiotics, and endocrine disruptors. And at our clinic, we go through quite a long procedure with almost all of our patients to identify and remove these things from the system. And that is one part of quieting the immune system. Again, not through suppression, but by actually removing causes. Another area that all of us can be involved with as doctors of chiropractic is to look at the patient's general hygiene. How is their diet? Are they receiving adequate sunlight? Are they drinking good quality pure water? Are they receiving adequate sleep? Are they being exposed to any occupational hazards? What's their social situation? Are they under a lot of emotional distress? Or, to put it in other words, have they achieved a reasonable extent of emotional poise? It is imperative that we as a profession begin to turn the tide of these rheumatoid disorders, including rheumatoid arthritis, that we as guardians of public health do more to help people with rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune disorders. This is Dr. Paul Goldberg on behalf of the Georgia Chiropractic Association saying thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you today.
Now back to our featured interview.
Well, we're actually piloting quite a bit of data already. So we're setting up the different groups where we're starting to record a lot of the patient-reported outcome measures. I'm working with a team in America called Chiropractic Future. Have you heard of the Chiropractic Future and the big strategic plan that we've put together?
But tell our listeners because they might not have heard about it.
Of course. So I think it was born out of all the state associations in the US collaborate, and that's Chiro Congress. Came up with this, that we really need a strategic plan for the future. I know it's been tried before, but this is the first time that all the state associations working together, which number one is a big deal, right?
Yes, it is. It's huge.
It's huge, right? They're working together. Let's come up with a strategic plan that we all agree upon, so that the big thing for Chiropractic Future is not uniformity, but unity, like working together despite our differences, collaboration and transparency. So they got thousands of survey filled in from chiropractors all around the world, even not just America. And based on that, put together a big strategic plan with some really amazing people that helped put that together. I never thought that they could do this, but they did. Like, they had some amazing mediators that put this together. I somehow managed to volunteer to run the research committee. Not quite sure how I managed that because I have no time. But anyway,
we thank you.
Well, it drives me because one of the things that we talked about in here is this practice-based research network. Is this, like, if we could do this, Amber, if we could be recording from even thousands of patients, from hundreds of chiropractors, it could make such a big difference to understand what really works in practice, Amber. Like, can you imagine if, like, we could compare people that got seen once every 18 months to people that got seen, once a week? What about once a week versus twice a week? What if we could start comparing big data sets? Who gets better and under what kind of care? Because I don't think it matters too much what techniques we use personally. It doesn't seem to matter in the research we've done, but it does depend on how good you are. And giving a shit seems to, chiropractors that care about their patients, I would imagine makes a difference. But imagine if we can actually start collecting this. And this is one of the key goals of the Chiropractic Future. I'm just heading up the research committee, but we are trying to translate the research we do have so that chiropractic profession knows about it and that the public understand. So that's two big things we're trying to do. We're trying to raise more chiropractic scientists. So we've got a big fellowship just been approved through Dartmouth University, which is a big deal.
Wow, that's huge.
We've got a person now, very, very lucky chiropractor, that gets to work within this research setting and be mentored to, again, develop research skills to become another PhD, because there's so much we don't know. And then another big thing we want to do is this practice-based research network. We want to collect data from your practices and be able to feed this back to you and the public, what works well for who and when and how. Because I think, again, like, chiropractic is undervalued. It's not understood. It is just like so not utilized the way it should be. If we get big data, if you've got thousands of people and we'll be recording from the patients eventually themselves as well, and you start to feel that they're changing under chiropractic care, you can compare it to how they respond to physiotherapy, to how they respond to medical treatments or surgeries. And again, start to look at, well, actually, if they just have conservative chiropractic care, they end up not only better with those symptoms, but they also have all these other benefits, like they sleep better, they feel better, they're more resilient, they cope better with their health problems. And it's like we can actually explain that now. So this is a really exciting sort of future direction that again, I'm somehow working on desperately.
Yes, it's super exciting. I mean, long gone are the days of them saying that we're a pseudoscience, right? Because now we are so far past that. I literally had this conversation with a patient the other day who sat in my office and told me how much he despises our profession, although he knows little about it. Now imagine that was a very hard conversation to have with him as I was treating his daughter, who was getting better. In 3 weeks' time, she stopped falling off of horses that she's been falling off of for 5 years. I've adjusted her twice, and we've had changes, and yet her father is an unbeliever. So, I love
the fact. It's not even a belief. It's a science. Yeah. That latest review article is what you should be sending someone like that, because it's got 250 references in it and explains the contemporary model of the subluxation and the neurophysiological effects of chiropractic care. And it is backed by a lot of science these days. First time I was accused of being a pseudoscientist, I had to look it up. I didn't know what it meant, but it means not getting peer reviewed. It means like just having an opinion, but not being peer reviewed by fellow scientists. And I'm like, Jesus, Amber, the amount of peer review my papers have gone through, like I have not, every single one of them, well, the bulk of them are in neuroscience journals. The bulk of them are actually in neurophysiology journals. And they've been peer reviewed by fellow neurophysiologists. And then the ones that I've published in chiropractic journals, again, they get peer reviewed by the chiropractic academics. Like, there is no pseudoscience. I mean, there are people that just make up opinions or make up their own journals. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It does exist. But that exists in every profession. Yeah, absolutely. And so just because you've got one or two cowboys doesn't mean that the bulk of the research that's being done these days, it is solid science.
Yes, it sure is. It's absolutely amazing. So how can they get involved? What can they do? Because not everybody is BioLife University. Not everyone's close to a school. Some people are kind of far out. What can they do to be a part of, Chiro Futures, advancing our profession forward, besides being involved with their state associations and things like that? What would you suggest? What are your thoughts?
So there are multiple ways that you could directly help what we're doing. For example, just go to Chiro's Academy and join and want to learn a little bit about the science that we currently have. That's us just teaching you the science that exists. On Chiro's Hub, again, you're supporting us. I've pretty much roped my entire research team into helping create these resources anyway. So if you want to share this latest science, the contemporary model of the subluxation through Chiro's Hub, joining that membership, that again supports the team. You can directly donate to research studies, like through the New Zealand College. I'll send you a link, Amber, because I've got, links to these different things anyway. Perfect. Where people can actually pick and choose from a menu. Like, we're about to start a new PhD student, a brilliant chiropractic lady, who is now going to start her PhD looking at the neurophysiology of adjusting babies. Never been done before. Never been done. Now she needs support. She's got like 3 children, so she needs a scholarship, number one. But number two, we need to also raise money for the actual research project itself. So there's 2 things there. And this is if that floats your boat. We've got a big prefrontal cortex study because we've shown we changed the prefrontal cortex. However, we need to now do a randomized controlled trial to measure prefrontal cortex outputs. So again, there's an option to choose to help support that. So like, are these changes over 12 weeks of chiropractic care? Do we get improvements in inflammation, immune function, movement, sleep, mental health, pain? So like, we can follow then the actual outcomes that would be relevant to prefrontal cortex. That's an option. We're doing another study. I don't know if you use manual muscle testing in your practice, but I have all my life. And I've always been really, really interested in figuring out what the hell is changing within the muscle itself. Well, we have the freaking technology now. We've got like high density EMG measures where not only can we like source localize what's happening inside the brain, but we can also source localize what's happening inside the muscle with the individual motor units. And how is that changing? Is it coming from the brain? Is it coming from the spinal cord? When a muscle tests strong versus weak with manual muscle testing. So that's an option, help support that project. Or just general support, like because we've got 50 other projects on the go. I've got a team of 21 now, so it's really ramping up. General donations. And then again, through Chiropractic Future, help support Chiropractic Future. Push this, driving the tech so that we can start recording from practices. Like, we've got these amazing people again that are volunteering their time to pull data from electronic health records into what we're calling a data lake. And he's got some master's students from a university that are helping him build it's like almost like a little AI tool where it's like we can ask the data questions. So, you know, if you've got this condition or you've got this kind of chiropractic care, what are the health outcomes, you know, from them, you know? So it's like it's happening, Amber. We're right in the middle of this technology advancement, and yes, there are multiple ways, and I'll send you all the links so that can be
lovely. I definitely want to make sure we get it out there. A lot of people are very excited for this interview to come up today with you. I'm super excited to be able to share this with them, and we've hit on some really important things about how they can help and what they can do. I really feel like post-COVID, since the pandemic, I knew this would be our time to shine, right? I just had this feeling. I was like, once we come out of COVID, like this is it. This is when we get our chance. Like we've been proving it, but now we can really show what we can do, what we're capable of. So I'm really excited to see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years.
And I think we need to let go of the fear. Like we need to let go of this fear. Look what's been done to people over the last 3 years. Like it's insane, right? You know, the amount of fear and crap that they've been subjected to. Like, you are so right. Now is our time to shine, because the people desperately need chiropractic care. It's not even funny.
Yeah, no, not at all. Especially, I mean, over here, I don't know about you guys, but we're fighting this opioid crisis here. You know, we've got so many things, and people are looking for alternatives. They're like, what can we do besides take something? And I'm like, yeah, well, you know, here we are.
This is literally why we created Chiro's Hub. We've got over 50 or 60 different little whiteboard animations on all these different topics, because I know that number one problem that I've heard from chiropractors is A, they're not able to communicate the science of chiropractic very well, and B, they don't have time, right? Because you should be busy checking and adjusting. So get your practice managers and stuff to share these little animations. You can have them running in a smart screen TV in your waiting room. We have over 5 hours of material. It's all based on the latest science, but all in the lens of this contemporary model, this brain model of chiropractic care, of the importance of the spine for your brain health and your overall health. We go into the opioids. We go into the new science of pain, because even that's changed, Amber. We know now that chronic pain is a whole lot of maladaptive processes, like just linking it together now so that the public understand what's going on in their body when their spine's dysfunction, and why it's so important that they and their family and friends have a spine free of interference.
Absolutely. And I think what you just said was they need to understand. So what I see has happened is doctors don't explain, right? You go to a medical provider, you go to a surgeon, they're going to tell you what they're going to give you and what you're going to do, but they don't really explain to you the why behind it. Like, why is your body doing what it's doing? And I found that, I think that's the thing that attracted me to chiropractic so much, was that we are teachers to our patients, and we love to explain to them, sometimes to the detriment of we nerd out a lot. We're like, okay, I got to back it up a little bit because I know I go deep with it. And some days I'm like, what answer do you want me to give you? The quick one word, like one liner? Or do you want me to really break down the processes? And surprisingly enough, I have quite a few patients that will sit there and listen to me give them a lecture. If I had the time, they would sit for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes and they'd be like, no, tell me at the highest level. And I'm like, well, I'll kind of bring it down a little bit, but they want to know.
Now, I know they do. And we've even created
knowledge.
We've even created a learning hub now. As part of the Chiro's Hub, there's a learning hub for patients and your CAs, your chiropractic assistants or chiropractic techs, so that they learn to answer some key factual questions. Because I mean, this knowledge has been around for 20 years now, but it takes time for that to become common knowledge. And we're in that phase now where it is becoming better known. But your CAs can be a big help in that, your techs and your keen patients that nerd out on this stuff. You can hook them up onto Learning Hub, and then they can start learning. And it's, for them, it's all free as part of the membership, and then again, that's supporting us to do the research that we're doing. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, it's a cycle. I love that. Yeah, because they want to know, they want to be more in control. And I think doctors have been too much of gatekeepers to the body. I'm not explaining to patients like, oh, well, don't worry about that. We're going to give you this pill, or we're going to do this procedure. And it's like, no. Tell me, explain to me the why behind it. I've always been that way. I was always a kid, like when they were doing, well, why are you using that? Why are you doing this?
It would be really cool if you can get the Georgia Chiropractic Association members to support Chiropractic Future. It'd be really cool if you could get that support, because we need it, because eventually we're going to be coming around to everybody wanting them to join in on this practice-based research network
right.
to gather data, right? So it'd be quite cool if they are aware, and if we can get through to them so they can see the value in it, like before we even come and reach out to them. Eventually we would like to know ongoing, who you're seeing, what you're doing, what advice you're giving them, so we can work out what kind of packages seem to have the best responses for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more information that we can give the AI, the better that they can give us an output of information. So that
is an exciting avenue.
Because
we've actually
huge.
Have we got time for a little story of a study that we've just been doing?
Yeah.
This is Chiro Tea, where we spill all the latest gossip in chiropractic.
So we get, because we have Imran in New Zealand at the Centre for Chiropractic Research at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic, because he is such an incredible bioengineer, we actually get quite a few bioengineering students doing their master's projects. They come out and do their thesis with us. So we just recently had 4 Danish bioengineering students all working on AI projects. So we give them the data, and then they do this AI analysis on the data set. So one of the sets of data we had is, we have this other French bioengineer who came out and did his PhD with us. So he recorded high density EMG, so like several hundred channels of EMG over the erector spina muscles from T12 to the top of the sacrum. So all the erector spina muscles on both sides. The chiropractor would come in and say exactly where between T12 and S1 they were subluxated. They actually checked the whole spine. And so they noted where the subluxations were. We've got all this high density EMG data. We've also got movement. So we've got the 3D motion capture analysis system, so we can get very good motion capture of their movement, so we can monitor it. So what we gave one of the groups of these bioengineering students out from Denmark was, we gave them all the high density EMG data during forward flexion. We actually had all the other movements as well. So we've got lateral flexion and twisting and bending, but just forward flexion, high density EMG data from the whole erector spina muscle. So this is a lot of data. You've got like 300, 400 channels of EMG data over time during that movement. Well, what they sort of said is that the chiropractor has identified where their subluxations. Can the AI data pick up on areas where it's different from the rest? So it's like, so they split it into 4, and they said there's upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right. And it was almost a 1-to-1 correlation. So if they were subluxated in the upper left, the data picked up on it, 1-to-1, almost like 100% correlation. And so then they started splitting it up into more and more segments. And Amber, the computer could find the subluxated segment that had been identified by the chiropractor almost down to the segmental level.
Wow.
So again, you talk about pseudoscience, like it's there. And this is the kind of projects that we can work on at the moment. Like, this was just to give them something to do.
Right.
But it's like, it's incredible. So imagine now, 10 years from now, there will be equipment that can sort of just run down the spine, a bit like the subluxation station, where it's actually identifying, look, here's an area where it's been, subluxated for quite some time. Or here's a new subluxation, because again, we know these changes take place over time. So if you've got a atrophied area, it is going to be different. It's going to be giving off different electrophysiological signals around that area, especially during movement. And that's just touching the surface of what we're doing. I think currently we have 65 projects on the go. So we could be here for hours just talking about what I'm currently working on. There's so much, but we could have a session 2 and a session 3 and a session 4. I enjoyed talking to you.
Absolutely. This will not be our last time talking to each other. We'll definitely have part 2s and 3s and 4s. You'll be our resident researcher. So we'll have to bring you back every couple months and see what's going on. Are you coming to the States? Are you coming to the States anytime soon?
I am, as of May, allowed back into the country.
What do you mean? Did we kick you out? They didn't let you in?
Non-citizens had to be vaccinated. So,
I didn't know.
I haven't been allowed into the US for the last 3 years, 4 years, I don't know, however long. So, yeah. So I am, as of May, I think Biden has dropped the vaccine requirements for non-citizens. So that's me, obviously.
I totally missed that. I didn't even think about how that would affect people who weren't vaccinated outside the country. But I didn't even realize that.
I missed out on Cleveland's 100-year celebration because I was meant to be keynote speaking at that. I was invited to Palmer's 125th celebration as a speaker. And so I was like, oh. But, my health is more important than...
Absolutely.
I'm off in a week. I'm off to Hong Kong, and then I'm off to Europe, where I think I'm speaking in England, in Spain, in Iceland, potentially Italy, and potentially Norway. So really looking forward to all of that. So I'm back on the road again for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And now that I am able to get to the US, I'm hoping that will pick up soon as well. So yeah.
I'm sure it will. We've been missing you over here. So
I've been missing you.
Find out, I know. When you find out, you let us know. So we'll have to let everybody know because I'm sure your fans, they're going to love to hear you and come see you. So
I'll be there. And in the meantime, they can go listen to me on Kairos Academy because I have got lots of classes on Kairos Academy. Do check it out.
Perfect. We will make sure to drop all the links. Heidi Haavik, thank you so much. Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. It's been incredible. Go buy the book, everyone. Please go get the book. We really need you to support. It's an amazing book, and it's actually a very easy read. It's not really hard to read at all. The reality check, you can find it. I think I found it on your website.
It's also on Amazon, so you can get it on Amazon. It's not a lot. It's like, I don't know, $19, $14, something like that for the ebook. So it's not expensive. It's Amazon, or it's on my website, which is HeidiHaavik.com.
Yeah, or the ebook. That's how I did it. I grabbed the ebook because it was instant, so it's perfect.
Ebook from HeidiHaavik.com. The ebook is $14 or something. Yeah.
Have a wonderful morning, because I know it's morning there. So have a wonderful start of your day. I'm going to go in here and make some dinner. I just really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thanks, Amber. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Don't worry. Really enjoyed speaking to you. Yeah,
absolutely. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks.
Our executive producer is Dr. Amber Jackson. Production staff is GCA Executive Director Valerie Smith and Communications and Event Coordinator Sequoia Gonzalez. Our hosts are Dr. Deborah Little, Dr. Ben McDowell, and me, Dr. Amber Jackson. Special thanks to our podcast founder, Dr. Noelle Steinley, and Public Relations Chair, Dr. Naila Smith. We thank you for listening, and we want to hear from you. Please send us a comment or a question to sgonzalez@gacairo.org. You may be featured in a future episode. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, Audible, and the GCA website at gacairo.org. Please subscribe, rate, and review us. Don't forget to follow us on your social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the participants and are not necessarily those of the Georgia Chiropractic Association or its employees.